So this chapter is entitled Dhyana Yoga, and it's a very, very amazing, very beautiful chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Before we start reading this chapter, please repeat after me. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om
Om Namo
Namo
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
So we're reading from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, and now we'll say the Prema Dhvani, these Om Gyanam prayers, Mangalacharan prayers, we should say. And so you can recite in your own, as we chant, Om Gyanam Timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitangsha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripasindhu Vyaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So like all chapters of the Gita, this chapter, again, it's one of the most beautiful chapters of the Gita. And when we think of this chapter, chapter 6, we think, oh, this is Dhyana Yoga, the yoga of meditation. So it's not so important. You know, we are bhakti yogis, we're engaged in devotional service, bhakti yoga. But Krishna actually doesn't say anything that is unimportant. And as you'll find, there's so much content in this chapter, so much nectarian instructions in this chapter that are very, very deep. And we'll try to cover a few of these nectarian gems in this chapter. So, this is the first verse of chapter 6. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Anashrita Karma Phalam Karyam Karma Karoti Ya Sasanyasi Cha Yogi Cha Na Niragnir Na Chakriya. the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obliged is in the renounced order of life, and he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. So this chapter begins by the Lord speaking. And the previous chapter, chapter 5, ended with Krishna speaking. So it's important to remember that when Krishna was speaking to Arjuna, he didn't say chapter 6. He didn't say chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7. Vyasadeva and our acharyas, they have divided this into chapters. So this verse begins very much in the context of chapter 5. What was the question that Arjuna asked Krishna at the beginning of chapter 5? The question that this whole discussion started with, chapter 5, which is Karma Yoga, is it better, Krishna, for me to give up work, or is it better to work in devotion? What is better? And here Krishna is actually continues to answer that question. One who is attached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obliged is in the renounced order of life, and he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. So you might recall that we mentioned last week that how there's two paths to the absolute truth. One is the path of the sannyasi, Sankhya Yoga, which is also called the path of sannyasa, and the other path is Karma Yoga, which leads to Bhakti Yoga, the path of pure devotion. And how Krishna says that ultimately these two paths are actually one and the same. And why are they one and the same? They're one and the same because you actually cannot be a renounced person. You cannot be a sannyasi unless you engage everything that you have in Krishna service. That is sannyas. Bhakti yoga, or engaging one's mind, body, and words, every resource in the service of the Lord, is true renunciation. And that's what Krishna is saying here. They cannot be a separate paths because there's just no meaning to renunciation without engaging in Krishna service. And engaging things in Krishna service is renunciation. And Krishna here is saying that the charlatan meditator who lights no fire and performs no duty, the artificial meditator, that is not a renunciate. Not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. Srila Prabhupada mentions how the sincere street sweeper who performs his or her service for the Lord is more advanced than the charlatan meditator. So in this chapter, we're starting with Dhyana Yoga, and Krishna is already setting the stage. What he feels is Dhyana Yoga. It's not a show. It's not showtime meditation. This point, not he who lights no fire. Actually, in the Jewish tradition, there's the day of rest, the day when God rested, the seventh day, and on this day, Jewish tradition says that everyone should rest. And what that means is one of the aspects of resting, of not working on that day, is not to light a fire. So in the Jewish tradition, they won't light a fire on that day. So there's a Jewish family that the author of this book, he mentions how as a child, he remembers that on that day, they would not turn on the electricity because electricity is fire. So you don't turn on any switches or anything like this. But their family lived on this, like the 40th or 60th floor of a high skyscraper building. They lived in like New York or something like this. So on that day, they would have to climb all the steps if they went down or up, because they would not use the elevator. Because the principle was not to do any work on that day. and so his reflection was that it seemed like we worked more when we didn't light the fire than if we did just light that little fire and take the elevator up. So if we don't light a fire, how much can we live? It's actually, it's artificial. It's not, we'll still end up working. And so therefore, we might as well give up the idea of not working, but rather working for Krishna. Engage our work in Krishna. Now, in this section, section 1 through 9, we have this first section of this chapter. And again, and thank you, Param Taruna Prabhu, for your nice question on the chat regarding the homework. These sections are again devotee made, so to say. Krishna didn't say this is the first section, that's the next section. But we do it because this is the way we understand things. Unless we divide things for our mind, it's difficult to follow things. And you see a theme in certain verses. So this first section is called a section because it has a certain theme. And the theme is, one who has controlled the mind has achieved the result of all spiritual practice. So Krishna's teaching of Dhyana Yoga is more than what you get at the YMCA. That, okay, this is how you sit and meditate. His teaching of Dhyana Yoga, or the yoga of meditation, is a teaching of how to control the mind, be in a meditative state, that is in a controlled state of mind, such that we have actually achieved the result of all spiritual practice. It's a very, you could say, deep instruction of not just a certain spiritual practice for a certain period of time, but of a lifestyle, but of a state that's attained. And Krishna glorifies the person who has controlled their mind. Krishna glorifies the practice of controlling the mind in all circumstances, in every circumstance. And those of you who have done nectar of devotion, you know this, that this is a principle of bhakti. This is not just a principle of dhyana yoga, of meditation. It is the highest principle of bhakti. All of our acharyas say the same thing that Krishna is saying here. Rupa Goswami in the Nectar Devotion, he says we only have one rule and one regulation. What is a rule? A rule is something that we should do. And what is a regulation? A regulation is something that we should not do. So that's why rule and regulation are always together, but they're different things. And Rupa Goswami is saying that there's only one rule that we have to follow in Krishna consciousness, and only one regulation. And all other rules and regulations are meant simply to serve this one rule and one regulation. And what is that? Always think of Krishna, that's the rule, always think of Krishna and never forget Krishna. That's the regulation. So everything that we do in Krishna consciousness, our chanting, book distribution, deity worship, reading of Shastra, is just simply meant to focus the mind on Krishna, to absorb the mind on Krishna. And this is why Dhyana Yoga is so relevant to Bhakti Yogis, because if we could just do that, we would be in the spiritual world. Always think of Krishna and never forget Krishna. Our only problem in this material world is that we forget Krishna. And therefore later on, as Krishna will say, we will see, Krishna says that one who sees me in everything and everything in me is never lost to me. He's always with me. That is the state of trance, seeing Krishna in everything and everything in Krishna. That's the practice. That's the bhakti process. All of these things are meant, to make us realize this point. The deity worship is meant to help us realize the connection of food to Krishna, of water to Krishna, of incense or a nice smell to Krishna, of flowers to Krishna. This is why the practice of deity worship is so nice, because it absorbs all of our senses in Krishna. So therefore, Prabhupada in some places, he says, worship the deity every day, dress the deity every day, bathe the deity every day, bathe the deity 3 times a day. If you like to dress Krishna, do it 3 times a day. Because that is the goal of Krishna consciousness, to be always absorbed in the loving service of Krishna. And the more we do these things, the more we'll think of Krishna. This is the purpose of chanting. Why we chant? Why we chant continuously? Because it makes our mind think of the name of Krishna. And that's something that we can do it every time. We're in the bathroom, we're showering, and we can sing Hare Krishna. Like, in the material world, people sing songs while they shower. So we can sing Hare Krishna while we shower. It's something that you can do it every moment, and therefore chanting is so powerful. When we're driving, we can chant. When we're sleeping in our dreams, we can chant. When we are cooking, we can chant. When we are cleaning, we can chant. And when we are working, we can also chant most of the time. But if not, then in between, we can chant. So only one rule and one regulation. Always think of Krishna and never forget Krishna. So Krishna makes this crystal clear in this section. Text 7, 8, and 9, the final 3 verses of this section. Krishna says exactly this. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. I'll read this verse again because this is the point that Krishna is making, the key point. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. Text 8. A person is said to be established in self-realization and is called a yogi or mystic when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquiring knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stones, or gold, as the same. Text 9. A person is considered still further advanced when he regards honest well-wishers, affectionate benefactors, the neutral, mediators, the envious, friends and enemies, the pious and the sinners, all with an equal mind. So, very deep messages here, very deep messages. And this teaching is repeated again and again in the Gita. It's amazing that we don't actually discuss this so much. We find in our day-to-day, you could say, discourses of Krishna consciousness, but Krishna repeats this over and over again throughout the Gita. The importance of this principle and how once a person reaches that stage, they've actually reached the goal of all the spiritual practices. That person has fulfilled the very purpose of why we are told to do so many things. The practices, the rules and regulations of devotional service. And the example of this, the most clear example is found in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the story of the Avanti Brahmana. And the story of the Avanti Brahmana is told by Krishna to Uddhava in the Uddhava Gita. And there in the story of the Avanti Brahman, Krishna tells Uddhava the story of this man who was very, very miserly. He was a very selfish man, and he was very wealthy, and he didn't like to share any of his wealth with anyone, not even himself and his family. And so one day, this Avanti Brahmana is thrown out of the house by his family members. They say, enough is enough. This rich man, he's so rich, but he doesn't give us any money, so throw him out of the house. And he loses all of his wealth. He becomes a street beggar. after being a millionaire. A very common story in the material world. And so Avanti Brahmana is then, once he's lost his wealth, he's lost his glory, then he's further mistreated by the citizens, right? This is common in the mature life, that people further take advantage of you. You're already fallen, but then, it's everyone started taking their own gripes out on the Avanti Brahmana. Past gripes, present gripes. He was a businessman before that, so he probably displeased some people, and they would throw things on him. There's even descriptions that some people would come and steal his food and tie up his shikha to a rope and tie him to a branch, like this, making fun of him in so many different ways. And so the Avanti Brahmana initially was really suffering. He was just really, uh, imagine from such a respectable position becoming someone so low, someone so mistreated, really, really disturbed. And so that made him go very deep and look into the cause of his suffering, reflect upon life, reflect upon his position. And then he realizes, he says, that actually my suffering is not there. My suffering is only within my mind. He realizes that these people are not the cause of my suffering. The cause of my suffering is only my state of mind. And when my mind is happy, then I am happy. And when my mind is distressed, then I am distressed. And let's just reflect upon this for a moment. A very, very rich, wealthy, fortunate person can be sitting in his mansion and be completely miserable and can be making other people miserable. Right? We've all met people like this. I'm sure you've met someone like this, or you know someone like this, or maybe you even live with someone like this. Living in a palace and still completely miserable. And you find a poor person on the street who has nothing. Just same, he also has his family, but very satisfied, very happy. The kids are poor, they don't have a lot of wealth, but they're having the time of their life, playing with a keychain or something very ordinary, a little hat, throwing it from here to there. But the state of mind is in happiness, although all the externals are wrong, and they're having the time of their life. I have a memory of this when I was at an Indian train station. Still remember this so starkly. It was just froze there for a minute looking at this family. I was at the Indian train station and this man came with his wife and like 4 kids. And they each had their little cloth with their stuff in it, bundled around like this. And the man came and he had a bit of a pot belly, and he came on the side of that station. He pulled his thing over and he spread out his sheet. And it was like a clean sheet, but it was kind of weathered, a little brown type thing. And he laid it down on the ground. And then his family member sat next to him. He sat down, and with such satisfaction, he laid down. And, one of his kids, lied down on his kind of big belly and the other kind of on his chest. And then the wife was next to him and she started, preparing the food. And right there on the train station, that's where they lived, that's where they worked. You could see he was in Brahmananda, very satisfied. So happiness is a state of mind, and we all know that. And this principle comes from Krishna. And therefore, Krishna, in many points in the Gita, says that satisfaction is a practice. It's a training of the mind. We have to train our minds to be satisfied. And we have to train our minds to be regulated and controlled. And that is only possible by experiencing the happiness in Krishna consciousness. Ultimately, we have to have a higher taste to feel satisfied. Well, then, if this is the result of yoga practice, then the question comes, and how do we control this rascal mind? which Srila Prabhupada often called the rascal mind. So backtracking a little bit, texts 2 and 3 tell us this. Krishna is saying, what is called renunciation, you should know to be the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme, or son of Pandu. For one can never become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. So we can control the mind only if we renounce the desire for sense gratification, and we can only renounce the desire for sense gratification by linking our mind to Krishna. Text 3, for one who is in neophyte in the eightfold yoga system, work is said to be the means. And for one who is already elevated in yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. So now Krishna begins telling us the practice of yoga, the process of the eightfold yoga practice, so that we can control the mind. So Krishna is not just leaving us in the woods saying that, do this, control the mind, but then not giving us a process. Because as we will see, it is very difficult, easier said than done. And it's precisely for this reason that after text 9, Krishna begins speaking of the yoga system. Now in this verse, what does this mean? Krishna is saying two different things. He's saying that for the neophyte, work is said to be the means. And for one who's elevated in yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. So for the neophyte, working as work in the sense of working for the work that we like to do is said to be the means. You work in the way that you are working, but you purify that and serve Krishna. And the higher stage is to give up material activities and simply to serve Krishna out of spontaneous and unalloyed attraction for Krishna. So the first stage, one is trying to purify one's existence. That's the lower stage of yoga through one's own work. Whatever one is doing, you offer it to Krishna. But the higher stage of yoga is when you're very elevated, you don't need to do that work anymore. You can simply work for Krishna. And this we apply in our own life and in our, you could say, in our helping others, preaching work, we also do that. Where when people are new, we tell them, you come and you participate in spiritual activities while doing what you're doing. And once a person advances more, they start to lose interest in what they are currently doing and they want to serve Krishna full time. So the process of yoga that Krishna mentions here now is the same process of yoga that is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam and which Krishna describes in the following verses. And this process of controlling the mind is not by restricting the senses, but rather engaging the senses in the service of the Lord. The Bhagavatam's yoga prescribes controlling desire by rechanneling that desire towards Krishna. So most of the yoga systems that we'll see, and the most standard is Patanjali's yoga system, they tell us, limit the mind, stop the mind. Stop them like this, stop it like this. But Krishna consciousness says, don't stop the mind, but rechannel it. Rechannel desires towards Krishna. And therefore, the Bhagavatam and the Gita's yoga is a superior form of yoga than what we find in general yoga teachings. Because it's more natural to the soul and it's more effective. And this is explained very thoroughly by Narad Muni to Maharaj Yudhishthira in the 7th canto. Narad Muni says, many persons have attained liberation simply by thinking of Krishna with great attention and giving up sinful activities. This great attention may be due to lusty desires, inimical feelings, fear, affection, or devotional service. I shall now explain how one receives Krishna's mercy simply by concentrating one's mind upon him. So, Narada Muni is saying that one attains liberation not by giving up attention to material things, not just that, one does do that, giving up sinful activities, but by focusing one's attention to Krishna, and this attention may be due to lusty desires, inimical feelings, fear, affection, or devotional service. So now, who is an example? Who are examples of devotees who attain the Lord by focusing their lust upon Krishna? The lusty desire upon Krishna.
Prabhuji, Kubja?
Kubja, very nice example. Kubja was a prostitute in the city of Mathura. And when Lord Krishna came to Mathura, that Kubja saw Krishna, and immediately by seeing Krishna, she felt very attracted to him. He was the most beautiful young man on earth. And due to that attraction, she attained perfection in the service of the Lord. Who are other examples of focusing their lusty desires upon Krishna?
Pingala.
Pingala is not exactly an example because she becomes renounced by becoming frustrated with her lusty desires. But she's not exactly attracted to Krishna's beauty. She becomes renounced through the frustration of material life, and then she, due to her past pious activities, fully surrenders to the Lord. But she was not exactly attracted to Krishna initially. And then someone says Supnaka. Someone said something softly. Was that you, Miranda Mataji? Maybe you said something. No? Okay. So that's, who do you see here in the picture that I'm showing?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Gopis.
Maybe I'm wrong. Gopis?
Yes, gopis.
Yes. So generally we don't think in that way, right? Because the gopis are 100% liberated souls, so how can they have lust? But Bhagavatam and Srila Prabhupada do write in this way. That, of course, lusty desires, the true lust, the ultimate lust is lust for Krishna, and that is pure love. But the fact is that they were attracted to Krishna. Krishna's, as a young, beautiful boy with flowing black hair and who plays a flute and who's the most beautiful person in the three worlds. That attraction was spiritual, completely spiritual, but they were attracted by Krishna's beauty. And so therefore, Srila Prabhupada says that following the footsteps of the gopis of Vrindavan, we should meditate on Krishna's beauty. And, the men might say, well, this is unfair. I used to feel this way. The women have it very easy. Krishna's a man, and they can cherish the beauty of Krishna as the most beautiful man in this world. Most wonderful, most handsome, most wise, strong, merciful, compassionate person in this world. But we find in the Krishna book and in the Bhagavatam that how all the residents of Vrindavan, not just the men and the women, but even the cows, the trees, the Yamuna river, the birds were attracted by the beauty of Krishna. And Bhagavatam specifically mentions the beauty, his fragrance, his the color of his body, his strong arms. The whole of Vrindavan was attracted by his beauty. So Krishna's beauty is such that if we're actually attracted by Krishna's beauty, it doesn't matter what physical form we are in. Krishna is most beautiful to everyone. So we have to focus. We all have lust in our minds. We have to focus this lust upon Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada in the Krishna book says that anyone who reads the Rasa Leela, by hearing it from the mouth of a pure devotee, will become free of lust. Shukadeva Goswami says this, that hearing this narration of quote unquote what materialist thinks are the lusty affairs between Radha and Krishna and the gopis will free a person from material lust, and therefore it is not on the platform of lust, it is pure love. But this frees a person from that bondage. So on one hand, we should not read these things when we are not fully qualified, because we will bring it to the material level. But on the other hand, Shukadeva Goswami and Prabhupada say that we should hear it from the lips of the pure devotee so that it will purify our heart of all lust. And Bhagavatam does mention that some of the gopis with Krishna, they were already eternally liberated souls. But some of the gopis who joined Krishna were great sages who were almost liberated souls, but they're not fully liberated. And by becoming 100% attracted to the Lord, they burned their material bodies and they regained their spiritual bodies. That deep meditation on the Lord, the constant meditation on the Lord's beauty, the Lord's wonderful qualities, burned their material bodies and revived their spiritual bodies. So Krishna is in fact the object of our lust. No one else is. Then that causes bondage and sinful life, but Krishna is. And then, so that's the quality of lust. Who reached Krishna by focusing their mind in inimical feelings towards Krishna?
Kamsa?
Kansa, yes, perfect. Kansa and many of the demons that Krishna kills. And they've attained perfection through that method. Of course, their perfection was Sayujya Mukti. So it is not good enough to stop there. After he was punished by Lord Krishna, Kansa's mood towards the Lord changed. Right when he was dying, he understood this is Krishna and surrendered to him. So at a certain point, that has to switch around. Otherwise, it's not pure devotional service. But that's how they attain perfection. Even if we're angry with God, it is still better than not thinking about God. A very deep message. So people who, are, blaspheming God, they're better than those who ignore him. Because when they blaspheme the Lord, they're still thinking of him. It's still a form of attraction. Isn't it true that we fight with people that we love the most? Why? Because we care about them. They matter to us. Therefore, we become angry with them. So, anger towards someone is the most basic stage, but it is a form of attraction and even affection towards someone, because that person matters to you. That's why you're angry. To a stranger who, we don't even realize their existence because they're strangers. So if someone is very angry with the Lord, you'll find actually that eventually they become devotees. There's one person who one time came to the temple, and he was a nice Indian man, and he was coming every week to the temple. And one day, just, mystically, he just bursted out in front of everyone. And he says, all you guys read is Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Who is this Prabhupada? And he was so angry with the devotees and with all these things. And, he then started even saying that, oh, he wasn't a great person. Oh, who cares? And this. And we thought, oh my gosh, this person, he's lost. Oh, what's going to happen? And you won't believe, after a few weeks, he became a devotee. He became a devotee of the Lord. And someone else, another devotee I was talking to, he had the same exact experience, where someone was really, really angry, and after that they became a devotee. Because Krishna appreciates that. At least you're wrestling with him. You're not ignoring him. And that's a form of affection. But as Rupa Goswami says, pure devotional service is anya bilashta shunyam jnana karmadinavitam anukuliyena krishnanu. Pure devotional service must be favorably performed. So that person was angry, but then he became a devotee, and then he was favorably performing devotional service for Krishna. Because unless we come to that platform, we won't get pure devotion. The next level is, next thing is through fear. Fear of God, we can reach God. Who is an example of this?
Prabhuji, I was under the impression that inimical would be Shishupal and fear would be Kamsa.
Yes, I actually just realized that myself. I was thinking, oh, I switched this around. Okay, I apologize. Yes, inimical feelings is Shishupal. The story of Shishupal, that's he criticizes Krishna 100 times. He's so inimical, he's constantly blaspheming Krishna. That's why I was giving the example of blaspheming. Shishupal blasphemes Krishna 100 times. And then he gets the association, the mercy of the Lord through the form of his disc. Krishna then, punishes him. A fear is Kansa. He was always afraid of Krishna, always afraid, because there's the Akashvani, the voice in the clouds that tells him that Krishna will kill you and he deserves to be killed. Same with Shishupal. These are very big demons, very, very big demons. They Kansa had ordered all the small children of Vrindavan to be killed, and he killed many such small children. Same thing with Shishupal. So the Lord punished them. But because they're fearful of the Lord, Kansa was fearful at the end, and he was constantly meditating on Krishna. Just like in the material world, if we're afraid of someone, we're constantly thinking of that person or meditating on that person. That fear made him into a devotee of the Lord. And the last one is affection to Krishna. Who attained the Lord through affection?
Mother Yashoda.
Mother Yashoda, very nice
Putana.
example.
Putana.
Putana, in some ways, yes. In some ways, but she came in an affectionate role as a mother, but not exactly through
Sabri.
Who?
Shabri.
Shabari. Okay. Shabari. Very nice. That's a nice example.
Prabhuji, fruit seller?
The fruit seller.
Mother Kunti.
Mother Kunti. Okay.
Arjuna.
Huh?
Devki Mata.
Arjun and Devaki Mata. Yes, the Pandavas. The Pandavas are the example of affection. So Narad Muni is speaking to Maharaja Yudhishthira, and he says, you have attained the Lord through your affection for the Lord. Mother Kunti and the Pandavas, they treated Krishna as a family member. And therefore Mother Yashoda and all the other examples that you gave are also correct.
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna. Sorry to interrupt. Is Radharani comes under this category?
Well, I mean, she comes under, you could say, I mean, like the liberated devotees of the Lord, the eternal devotees of the Lord. Radharani is par excellence. They have affection par excellence. They are, like all the rasas, they are offering to the Lord. But yes, we can definitely say Radharani. But affection is more in the role of a family member. This is more like less conjugal and more in the mood of the family member. So therefore the Pandavas, Mother Yashoda, these are more exemplars of affection.
And Balram Dao?
Okay, he's also a very nice example. Yes. So,
Sudama.
Sudama, yes, Sudama is also a very nice example.
Akrur and his uncle, Duryodhan's uncle, I forgot. Vidura.
Yeah,
Oh,
Vidura's wife also, right? Offering the banana peel and Krishna accepts it, right?
yes. Virtually every devotee in Krishna's pastimes, we can say, through affection, they're reaching him. So all these liberated devotees, they attain the Lord through their affection. And the devotee who is on the path of devotional service is the final one. Through devotional service, we can attain the Lord. And who are examples of devotional service? Through their devotional service, they attain the Lord.
Hanumanji.
Ambrish Maharaj.
Ambrish Maharaj, very nice example. By engaging all of his senses in the service of the Lord, he attained the Lord. All the sages, all the saints, generally speaking, the most common example is people attain, and this is actually mentioned in the purport and in the next verse, which I'll show you, that the most sure hit standard way of attaining the Lord is through devotional service, by the loving devotional service of the Lord. So next verse here. My dear Yudhishthira, the gopis by their lusty desires. So here it is. This is directly Srila Prabhupada's translation. The gopis by their lusty desires. Kansa by his fear. Shishupal and other kings by envy. The Yadus by their familial relationship. Yadus, meaning all the residents of Dwaraka, with Krishna. You Pandavas by your great affection for Krishna. And we, the general devotees, by our devotional service, have obtained the mercy of Krishna. Prabhupada here writes, the general devotees, by our devotional service, have obtained the mercy of Krishna. So these are all different ways of engaging the mind in Krishna. And we can take any of these paths. So the beginning of the ladder is called Yoga Ruruksha stage, and the highest rung is called Yoga Rudha. So you may recall this is the verse, this one. For one who is neophyte in the Eightfold Yoga system, work is said to be the means. And for one who is already elevated, cessation and material activities is said to be the means. So this first one is Yoga Ruruksha, and the second one is Yoga Rudha. When a person is neophyte, they're called Yoga Ruruksha. That is, they are simply engaging their work. And once one is giving up all material activities, that is Yoga Rudha. Those are the two stages of the yoga system. So now we start with the first one, Yoga Ruruksha stage. And this stage is the eightfold practice of Patanjali's yoga system. And I didn't make this up, but Prabhupada writes it in the purport in chapter 6. In one of the purports, he says that the yoga system is Patanjali's yoga system. Patanjali is like the, he's like the ground zero of yoga. And Krishna is...
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I'm sorry to interfere, just real quick, I'll ask you. So who is the transcendentalist in chapter 10? Like I read it, but I couldn't understand. Is Krishna talking about devotee or a yogi? I just want to know the meaning of that so that further I can understand.
So in chapter 10 or which chapter are you speaking of?
No, Prabhu, same chapter, verse 10.
Oh, in verse 10, okay. In verse 10. So let's go to verse 10. Check this. A transcendentalist should always engage his body, mind, and self in relationship. So a transcendentalist is someone who is on the path of transcendental life. He may be also liberated. He may also be a transcendentalist and someone who's on the state of samadhi. But a transcendentalist is someone who is not a materialist, is a transcendentalist. They're on the path of the transcendental life.
Can he be a devotee?
Yes.
Can he be a devotee?
So, see, a transcendentalist literally means someone who's above the three modes of nature, or is working towards going above the three modes of material nature. So when we are in the modes, we are in the modes. But when we transcend the modes, then we are a transcendentalist. So a devotee of the Lord is definitely a transcendentalist. It's just it's a synonym for a devotee. Yes.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good point. Yeah. So Krishna is speaking, the transcendentalist is the yogi. And the yoga system is taken from Patanjali, is derived from Patanjali, and you find it all over the Shastras. And here Krishna is also describing the same eightfold yoga system. And obviously we know that yoga eventually comes from Krishna. But a key point here is that yoga is taught by the sages. And Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita 5,000 years ago. And these sages like Patanjali had, already been teaching yoga system. Shweta Mataji, there's some problem, I think, with your phone because it's marking the screen. Something, it's easy. I know it's sometimes easy to do that. So if you were getting that problem, you can log out and then log back in, and that should solve the problem. So this yoga system Krishna is referring to is also the same as Patanjali's, because the sages, this is already well known during Krishna and Arjuna's time. So there's 8 stages of yoga, the first 4 stages and the second 4 stages. And I divided them because, there is there's a progression here, and the first 4 stages are the first 4 stages, kind of more basic stages. So yama is the first one, which are the rules. Yoga practice begins with some rules of life. And modern yoga completely ignores this. But there's no point in being a yogi, and we can never be successful in yoga practice unless we follow some rules. And the second thing, niyama, is regulations, some do's and some don'ts. The third one is asana, which is physical alignment. We have to be sitting in the right position. We have to be physically also aligned in order to do yoga properly. This is very interesting because good health, Prabhupada speaks of good health, that how a devotee does not desire anything, but does desire a healthy life, because a healthy life is needed to serve the Lord. If we're unhealthy and we're not taking care of our body, then how will we, with great gusto, serve the Lord? Although we should not let the body limit our service to the Lord, we should be willing to take anxiety for the Lord, take extra lecture, but we have to take care of our health. Pranayama, breath control, breathing exercises, very famous in yoga practice. Pranayama, controlling the breath. And then the 5th stage is pratyahara, which is withdrawing the sense organs from the objects. So the yogi, first of all, removes his sense objects from material things. We do have to give up watching bad movies before we can focus our mind on Krishna. Prabhupada says, material life and spiritual life go ill together. So in focusing our mind on Krishna, we are also giving up certain things. And sometimes we have to give things up before we can do the good things, because they're just so distracting. We have to give up alcohol and drugs and illicit sex and gambling. So these are things that we withdraw our senses. Of course, this also comes in yama and niyama, but withdrawing the sense organs from the sense objects. But then you cannot stay in an empty state. The next state is called dharana, which is drawing the object of concentration in the mind. So we've removed all the clutter. Now what do? Whatever we do want to meditate upon, dharana means drawing that within our mind. Dhyana is then meditating on that which we have drawn within our mind, meditating on the content of concentration, and samadhi, which is complete absorption in the object of meditation. Samadhi is complete absorption in the object of meditation. This is then, it's basically an intensified form of dhyana. Samadhi is complete. So these are the 8 stages of yoga. Now, in these verses, text 10 to 27, which is the largest part of this chapter, Krishna actually describes each of these stages and what these stages involve. So that's what he's talking about in this one. So before we go with that, just a quick quote on what I was saying. By practice of yoga, one becomes gradually detached from material concepts. This is the primary characteristic of the yoga principle. And after this, one becomes situated in trance or samadhi. which means that the yogi realizes the super soul through transcendental mind and intelligence, without any of the misgivings of identifying the self with the super self. Yoga practice is more or less based on the principles of the Patanjali system. Here we go. Some unauthorized commentators try to identify the individual soul with the super soul, and the monists think this to be liberation. But they do not understand the real purport of the Patanjali system of yoga. So if you actually read the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, you will actually find that in the 4th or 5th chapter, I think, it's somewhere in the middle, Patanjali mentions how in the course of the practice of yoga, as the yogi practices yoga, the yogi will get mystic powers, will get some siddhis, mystic potencies. But the yogi should not be distracted by them, because those are actually traps. Because the goal of yoga is not to gain those mystic powers or to become, merged with Brahman. Those mystic powers are actually tests on the way to make the process of yoga more difficult for the aspiring yogi. The goal of yoga is missed by those people. The goal of yoga is actually realization of the Supreme Lord, Ishvara, who is Krishna. So many yogis, we see that they gain great mystic powers. And if they become entranced by that, they actually don't reach the success of yoga. And so many of the famous yogis of the East, the very famous popular gurus, they are so popular because they actually did get some yoga siddhis. I mean, they actually do have something genuine. That's how they get thousands, even millions of followers. And we might wonder, how is it, how could a quack just get millions of people and mislead them? Well, sometimes it's possible, but generally speaking, they actually do have some genuine mystic power. That's why they become so famous. But the problem is that then when they get that mystic power and they get all the fame, they lose the goal. And so as an aspiring yogi and us aspiring yogis, we have to be careful of that. That in the course of our Krishna consciousness, we will actually get many material opulences. I mean, devotees are actually very opulent, materially speaking. They're very attractive people, very fortunate people, very healthy people compared to the rest of the material world, and very famous also sometimes. But if we become entranced by the results of these yogic things, we might miss the goal. So now the 8 principles of yoga. The first one is yamas, the rules. So in this chapter, what are some of the rules that Krishna mentions? Quickly, you can start calling them out. I know most of you haven't read it, but you can flip through the verses and see which ones have you. I thought this will be more fun interactive than if I do it for you.
To go to a
He
secluded
should live
place.
in a secluded place.
That is okay. Yeah, it can also be called go to a secluded place.
Prabhuji, regulated eating and sleeping.
Regulating one's eating and sleeping. So Prabhupada says that a person cannot be successful in yoga unless if they eat too much or they sleep too much, if they eat too little or sleep too little. A yogi can only be successful if they are moderate in their eating and sleeping. Very good. What else?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Maybe he should be the free from desire and feelings.
Let's focus on what is written in the translations. So directly from the translations.
Control his mind.
Okay. That comes more in later stages. This is more lifestyle. Yamas refers to things that we do, that we must do in our lifestyle.
Regulate work and creations.
Regulate what?
Work and creations.
And creations. And recreation. Like regulated in one's eating, sleeping, in one's work, recreation.
The person should be sitting in a proper position.
That comes later. That's not one of the yamas. This is actually very good. This is why we're going through this, so we can distinguish the 8 stages of yoga. Because this is universal. I mean, you find all over the place people will say the eightfold path, Ashtanga yoga, right? Ashtanga, eightfold path. So this is the very important. So another one is practice of celibacy.
Giving up intoxication.
Giving up intoxication. Right? So
How is that?
so these are very, very common, and Prabhupada says this is the first mistake of the modern yogis, that they do not even practice celibacy. Right? And there's no question of yoga practice without practicing these regulated activities of eating, sleeping, recreation. Now the niyamas, the regulations. What are some of these regulations or don'ts? Don't do this. Well, to some degree, these are the negations of the rules. So rules is practice celibacy. The regulation will be no illicit sex. So don't, do that. The rule is, accept Krishna Prasad, and the regulation is don't drink alcohol. Right? So in some ways it's negations, but any others that stand out to you in the chapter, any regulations that we have not covered in the rules?
Oh, Krishna Prabhu, avoid Prajalpa.
Avoid Prajalpa. Yes. Avoid Prajalpa. Very good. Prajalpa means unnecessary gossip. Mature talk. Yes.
Not eating very delicious and opulent food.
A yogi should eat simple. So maybe what Prabhupada actually mentions is eating only Krishna Prasad. Because Krishna Prasad can be opulent, and we should try to avoid opulent food, even if it is Krishna Prasadam. But the starting yogi, the yogi on the path, may not be able to give up opulent food. But main regulation is to not eat food that is unofferable to Krishna. So avoiding tamasic foods like meat.
Prabhuji, for the yam, can we say, in Prabhupada's chanting, he says, sit properly. And niyam would be the negation of that, basically, sitting with an improper posture or something.
So that's perfect. That leads us to the next one. Prabhupada saying sit properly is his teaching of asana to us. That doesn't come in the yamas or niyamas. As I mentioned, yamas and niyamas, they refer to the principles of life, not exactly how your physical thing. And Patanjali actually mentions 5 yamas and 5 niyamas, which I will give to you later on. I'll share it to you. It's actually another little commercial for my book. This whole thing is with the 5 yamas and niyamas that Patanjali mentions, which then the Bhagavatam divides into 12. It's in chapter 3 of my book. So you can read more there, or I'll send it to you. Now the next thing is the asana, which is the physical alignment. So that is sit properly. Like Prabhupada, sit properly. What else? How is Krishna describing this? These are the physical characteristics of the actual yoga practice. And it's very vivid here in chapter 6. How is Krishna describing it? Yes, Mataji.
Lay kushagrass on the ground.
Okay. These are the externals of the yoga practice. Very good.
The surroundings, Prabhuji, the surroundings,
Okay.
the
Have
atmosphere.
a peaceful surrounding. Don't try to meditate in a bar.
Control your breath.
That's control your breath is not asana.
One should not sit too high or too low. And should
Very nice.
sit in a sacred place.
Very good. In a sacred
Prabhuji?
place, yes.
Sit in a secluded place would be niyama or asana, like not interacting too much with materialists is what is sitting in a secluded place, associating with devotees.
That's actually, that's why I'm saying there is overlap in these eight stages. There is overlap because on one hand, asana actually, I think you're right, that actually that would be more a yama or a niyama. The peaceful surrounding does not exactly have to do with your physical alignment. It has to do more with the principles. Although it does have to do with, the reason I put it there, it does have to do with the physical space. So it still is something to do with your physical surrounding. So, but you know, it fits better in yama and niyama. I agree.
Yes.
Prabhuji,
Thank you.
Being kind of cross-eyed and staring at the tip of your nose.
Yes. So that's the alignment of the neck. And Prabhupada says if you close the eyes completely, you will fall asleep. If you open the eyes, you'll start looking everywhere. So the yogi keeps his focus on the tip of his nose. Try that. The yogi meditates on the, not meditates, meditates on Krishna, but his eyes are looking at the tip of his nose. Now, that's a yoga practice not so easy because after 30 seconds, it gives you a headache. So it's a little difficult. So yes, where
I have a question.
Okay.
I have a question. Why is the lay in kusha grass, which is supposed to be very sharp? So where do you lay that one, grass?
So this is just the yogi puts it next to him because the kusha grass is auspicious. So the kusha grass is it's used for sacrifices. It's used for sprinkling spiritual water. So the kusha grass is not what the yogi is sitting on.
Right.
But
very
it's
sharp.
laid next to him.
Yeah. Okay.
Good point. So then, what is the yogi sitting on?
Deer skin?
Yes.
Oh, deer skin. Yes.
Sorry, someone saying something? So why is it the case that a devotee of the Lord would sit on deer skin, the skin of a dead animal? First of all, it should be pointed out that
Deer skin keeps some insects and other animals away.
Yes. So first of all, it should be pointed out that the deer skin is not from a deer that has been killed by the devotee or by anyone. The skin is from an animal that is already dead. So once the animal naturally dies, their skin is taken for this purpose. So this is a practice in ahimsa or non-violence. This is not a violent practice. The skin is coming from an animal that has naturally died, and that skin is taken. Why this animal skin? Like Prabhuji mentioned, that the skin of the deer is such that it repels insects. So if you're meditating in the forest, one major problem you'll have is scorpions, cockroaches. They'll come and eat your body. So by sitting on the deer skin, the insects stay away. Something Krishna has given as a gift to the deer skin. And it also keeps away reptiles like snakes, which again, especially in tropical environments, is a big problem. So the deer skin allows us to not have that problem. Okay, and then this is asana, and then now pranayama, breath control. So a few of you mentioned the different activities of breath control that are necessary. Controlling the breath. What others? Someone mentioned other things.
In the previous chapter, it was mentioned in the 4th chapter, for example, balancing the inward breath with the outward and therefore stopping all breathing.
Yes.
That was almost stage of samadhi, but it was in a previous chapter.
Yes. Balancing the inward with the outward. Very good. It's interesting, if you do actual yoga practice, they will do that. They'll say, inhale for 10 seconds, exhale for 10 seconds, inhale for 10 seconds, exhale for 10 seconds. So, yeah, like that. And other such practices, actually, I'm also remember that he does mention here. Like we find in the example of Dhruva Maharaj, that he controlled his breath completely. And when he controlled his breath completely, all the universe stopped. So now these four initial practices are already involved in the practice of bhakti. As devotees, we don't practice these things separately. Generally speaking, we can. But like for example, in our temples, we don't have pranayama classes. I think it's very helpful if people do pranayama and asana and the different asanas of yoga. But the reason why these first four stages I put separately is because in the stories of the great sages in the Bhagavatam, you don't find these emphasized. The main emphasis now comes in starting the 5th stage, which is pratyahara, withdrawing the sense organs from the objects of the senses. So Krishna describes this in different ways in this section, but not exactly explicitly. But this is a very important stage. As I mentioned in bhakti, the devotee of the Lord does not focus on the objects of the senses because it is inherently very frustrating. We focus on things that we cannot enjoy. So that is pratyahara. Then the next one is dharana, which is drawing the object of concentration in the mind. So in the Bhagavatam, you'll find that the gopis are described as yogis. The way that they are actually described, to make it clear that these are not ordinary girls, these are actually great sages. Their approaching the Lord is actually divided in terms of the 8 stages of yoga. And the first stage, pratyahara, of these second 4 stages, so the 5th stage, pratyahara, is described that they close their eyes. When they see Krishna is present before him then, right? So they see Krishna, but then they close their eyes. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, why does the gopis, when Krishna is present in front of them, why do they close their eyes? No, they close their eyes. And then dharana, they draw the image, the darshan of the Lord in front of them. They draw him within their minds. Why do they do this? Because the gopis worship Krishna in the mood of separation, right? Birha Bhakti, love and separation. The highest, most intense form of love is love and separation. So the gopis are always concerned about losing Krishna. Krishna's here, but Krishna may go. Krishna's here, but we may have to go. This is parakiya ras. It's not wedded love. So it's unwedded love. It's secretive love. So they're loving Krishna, but there's no surety that Krishna is going to be with them. They're not exactly, with him all the time. So dharana, they pull Krishna's image within their mind and focus on it, so that then Krishna cannot be, because Krishna is within their mind. They're seeing Krishna, with the same eyes that they're seeing him outside. They're seeing Krishna as real as Krishna outside. But now the soul sees through the mind, right? But now Krishna's inside the mind. So now Krishna can go, but he won't go because he's present there in his mind. So pratyahara, dharana, they draw the Lord within their mind. Then dhyana. Dhyana is concentrating then on that object of vision present in the mind. Then they meditate on it completely, wholly and solely. And then that meditation becomes even deeper and deeper and deeper. And then that becomes samadhi. Complete absorption in the object of meditation. Then the gopis, although they're standing in front of Krishna, they're in complete samadhi, complete absorption in the Lord. And then, of course, their samadhi is both internal and external. They dance with Krishna. But initially, when they see Krishna, that vision is so moving. It is so, awesome. Awesome in the sense, it's just awesome, not in the sense of awe and reverence, but so touching that they completely lose their external existence and enter into a state of samadhi. So Krishna here in the chapter, he's mentioned this, that how by practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist, his mind regulated, attains to the kingdom of God, or the abode of Krishna. This is a verse on samadhi. By cessation of material existence. The cessation of material existence. One completely gives up his whole material existence. And that is the perfect stage of samadhi. So, perfection. Now, this stage of samadhi, then, in text 20 to 36, Krishna expands on this. And he says that the perfection of yoga is realizing Krishna as a super soul. He started with this also. You might recall we talked about realizing Krishna as a super soul. So for one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. So this is the fundamental difference between Patanjali's Yoga Sutra and the Gita and the Bhagavatam's yoga. They are both doing eightfold yoga. But the fundamental difference is that Patanjali says that the content of your concentration, that is, what you are concentrating on, is not so important. You can concentrate on a black dot, you can concentrate on the sun, it's all the same. The main focus is to concentrate. But in the Bhagavatam and the Gita, they're saying the content of consciousness, of concentration, is very important. It's very important to not just concentrate, but to concentrate on Krishna. See Krishna everywhere, in all things, at all times. And that is what purifies the mind and senses completely. So after this, and in this section, once Krishna has described this wonderful, beautiful eightfold path of yoga, Arjuna rejects controlling the mind as impractical because his mind appears uncontrollable. He says, Chanchala himana Krishna, mati balavadridam. Krishna says, this mind, Krishna, is so chanchala, it is impossible to control it. I think that controlling the mind is more difficult than controlling the wind. And in response to that, Krishna says, what you're saying is true. Controlling the mind is more difficult than controlling the wind. It's the most difficult thing in this world. The great emperors of the world are able to control the whole world, but they are unable to control their own minds. They're unable to control their own anger, their own greed, their own lust. But, Krishna says, it is possible by two things, very important, two things, by constant practice and detachment. So Krishna actually doesn't accept Arjuna's claim that the mind is uncontrollable. He says it's difficult, but it's possible through practice and detachment. But because it is so difficult, therefore, the content of consciousness, the content of concentration is so important. This is why Patanjali's Yoga Sutra is not so effective, but Krishna consciousness is. Because if one has a positive meditation, that same control becomes so much easier. For a young girl and a young boy, Prabhupada gives this example, it is so easy to think of one another. In fact, it's hard to get their mind off of one another. That same meditative practice is effortless because the content of meditation is so nice. In the same way, Rupa Goswami says that do not, if you still want to have your loving relationships and your attraction to your materialistic friends and relatives, then he says, do not go to the bank of the river Yamuna, because there you will see Lord Shama Sundar in his threefold bending form playing his flute. And when you see that vision, he says, then you will be unable to think of anything else. Then automatically the mind becomes fully controlled because one can only think of Shama Sundar Krishna. And the gopis of Vrindavan actually prayed to the Lord. They said that our problem is that we cannot get our mind off of you. That please, Krishna, help us. We cannot stop thinking of you. And that is our problem. So the process of bhakti makes it very natural. So after Krishna disagrees with Arjuna, and here this is why you see how the Gita is truly, it's a conversation. And how Arjuna is truly a devotee, taking the role of a bewildered person and struggling with these things. So after Krishna disagrees and tells Arjuna, no, you're wrong, it can be done, Arjuna is still worried. And Arjuna, he still doesn't really accept Krishna or agree with Krishna. And he's concerned, what will happen to me, this passionate warrior that I am, if I'm not successful in this yoga practice? Because I can't control my mind. And so then Arjuna asks Krishna, he says, what happens to the unsuccessful yogi? So how smart he is. He first says, it's not possible. And then when Krishna says it's possible, then he says, okay, Krishna, but then tell me, if I'm unsuccessful, what happens to me? Almighty Arjuna, does not such a man who is bewildered from the path of transcendence fall away from both spiritual and material success and perish like a riven cloud with no position in any sphere? So he's saying, I'll give up my material life, my material happiness. I'll take to spiritual life, this practice of meditation. And if I'm not successful, then what will happen to me? I love this metaphor, he says, perish like a riven cloud. A cloud in the middle, in this liminal state, they say. The middle state. I didn't make it materially, and I also didn't make it spiritually. So what will happen to me? Will I just lose everything? The Supreme Personality of God had said, O son of Pritha, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. So, very important. Krishna, he asks this question, he says, what happens to the unsuccessful yogi? Krishna says, do not worry. If you are a transcendentalist, again, that word is there. If you are a devotee of the Lord and you're engaged in auspicious activities, you will not meet with destruction in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. So where exactly does the unsuccessful yogi go? In the following verses, Krishna tells us. He says, it is better, so just on this one point, when I was taking Bhakti Shastri myself, then one of my teachers was Ravindra Suruprabhu. And I distinctly remember on this theme of being an unsuccessful yogi, he said one sentence that was very profound. And I never forgot that sentence. And that sentence was this: it is better to be a failure in spiritual life than a success in material life. This is what Krishna is saying here. that in the spiritual life we may fail. It's a fact, we may fail. But it's better to be a failure in spiritual life because you don't lose anything than a success in material life. Why? Because even though if you're a success in material life, you still don't gain anything. So as devotees, we should never feel that I gave up my material life and see, now I'm a devotee and I'm being treated like this. And what was the whole point? No. We are always successful as a devotee. So what is that success? In our next life, different levels, Krishna says. If you practice yoga, but you really didn't make much progress. You made some progress, but not so much progress. In your next life, and in the reason why you didn't make so much progress, Prabhupada actually says this in the purport, is because you really got attracted by material things. You got attracted by money, particularly. So I mentioned to you how the Yoga Sutras mention this, right? That in the course of practicing yoga, you get material benedictions, and how so many of our modern yogis, they stop at that point because they become rich and famous, like the mega churches, right? The preachers become millionaires. And then the devotion becomes secondary and their money becomes primary. So to such an unsuccessful yogi, because they were on the path, but they were unsuccessful and they got attracted by wealth, in their next life, they'll be born in an aristocratic, prosperous family. And that is a pious birth. Why is that a elevated birth? Because the reality is that if we have wealth, we do have more time for spiritual progress. And pretty much everyone on the call falls in that category. None of us are living in Syria. None of us are in places where we're being bombed and we don't have food to eat and we're literally begging for food. In such a situation, such a desperate situation, how can you develop your spiritual life? Right? You're just trying to survive. And that position is not a very fortunate situation. We, of course, have to help people become fortunate. That should lead us to wanting to help people. But the reality is, if help doesn't get to them in time, or they will simply their entire life be engaged in trying to maintain their existence. And many scholars, religionists, they speak of this thing, that on an empty stomach you cannot think of God. Unfortunately, you may call out to God, you may pray to God, and that may be something very significant. But we have to feed people's stomachs if we want to expect them to read Bhagavad Gita. They cannot be hungry. So prosperity does give you a platform to practice spiritual life. But prosperity can also be very distracting, and that's why it's not a very pious birth, but it is a pious birth. More pious than that is a yogi who has been practicing but was unsuccessful midway. And such yogis are Shuchi now. They're born in pious families of the pious. So they're born in families of those who are pious. Shuchi now. So, in a religious family, in a spiritual family. Dhimatam. Dhimatam is those transcendentalists who are on the path of spiritual life and they almost made it. They were actually liberated, but due to some small attachment or mistake, they don't make it in that life. They are born in the families of Dhimatam, or of those who are endowed with great wisdom. The families of devotees, the families of transcendentalists, they are born in that situation where their divine consciousness, Prabhupada says, is immediately revived after their next birth. So an example of this is Bharat Maharaj. He attained the Lord. He literally gave up his vast empire, which was the most sought after thing in the world, his beautiful wife, his family, and went to the forest, meditated upon the Lord in pure devotion, but he got attached to a deer. So in his next life, he was born as a deer, but endowed with great wisdom. And then in his next life, he was born in the family of Brahmanas, great devotees. Of course, he was very, very advanced because he even remembered his past lives. But that's the idea there. Now, you could say exception to this is that Prabhupada says that in Kali Yuga, Lord Chaitanya also places great devotees, that is in this third category, not in families of devotees or brahmanas or pious people, but also places these great souls in fallen families, meaning that someone, their parents were drinking, smoking, completely materialistic, not thinking of God at all, very atheistic, but a great devotee may be born in such families. And why is this? Because of two reasons. One is that transcendentalist may have still had some base material desires that could only be fulfilled if they had the, or you could say burned off, if they had the opportunity to experience those. In other words, they have those desires, so Krishna is giving them an opportunity. Okay, and you see that in great devotees in our movement, because it seems like so many of our greatest saints in our Krishna conscious society were born in families of hippies. They were taking drugs before they came to Krishna consciousness. They were intoxicated. And so what they have told me in so many different conversations is that by that life, by the time they came to Krishna consciousness, they were completely done with material life. They had seen the worst of it, and therefore they could completely become absorbed in Krishna consciousness. One such example who comes to mind, and I don't think I'm embarrassing him by telling this, is His Grace Vijay Prabhu, who's, he's a pure devotee of the Lord. He's completely self-realized, pure devotee of the Lord, and such an exalted devotee. And he was mentioned to me one time that before becoming a devotee, he was very intoxicated on one occasion. He was saying he was very, very intoxicated. And because he was intoxicated, he was, he had that experience. And so he said that when he came to Krishna consciousness, he had experienced everything and he was just completely ready to surrender. And once he came to Krishna consciousness, he's been a perfect, he's a perfect brahmachari his whole Krishna conscious career, 40 years, and every day, distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, completely surrendered. So he was not born in the family of great devotees. He was born in a quote unquote fallen situation or family. But Lord Chaitanya does this because, one, to fulfill some past material desires, and second, to show the transcendence or the greatness of Krishna consciousness, how Krishna consciousness does not depend on any external circumstance. Okay, and I will skip this here. And one of the examples, very important example that is given in this chapter, is the quality of a yogi, which is one of determination. One can only be successful in this practice if one is completely determined. And although it is impossible, and this example is given in relation to Arjuna's question that it's impossible to control the mind, although it is impossible to do so, but if we're determined, then the Lord will help us. And due to that help, due to our determination, we will be able to be successful. And to illustrate this, Prabhupada gives the example of the sparrow and Garuda. One time there's a sparrow who was laying her eggs on the beach on the side of the ocean. And the eggs, she was sitting on her eggs, and one day there was a tide and the ocean swept forward and took her eggs into the ocean. And the sparrow began to cry, began to weep pitifully. But then from within her heart, she got an intense determination. And she said, who is this ocean who thinks that he can take my kids? And she says, I will empty out the ocean with my own beak, drop by drop. I will empty out this ocean to get my eggs back. And so she does exactly this, beak by beak, she's emptying out the ocean. And I mean, she wasn't crazy. She knew it was an impossible task, but she was completely determined to do it. And when she then did it, all the other living entities around her began to laugh. They began to laugh at her. Ha 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 ha. What a fool, this bird. She thinks she can empty out the ocean. But she went on. She continued doing it. And then Garuda, the great bird, happened to be flying by. And he looked down, his own species, right? He looked down and he saw that this little sparrow was engaged in this activity. And so then Garuda, he said, oh, okay, my friend, my relative is engaged in this activity. He comes down and he tells the ocean, oh, ocean, I will also help the bird do this. Just to help her here, bird will be successful, sparrow will be successful, but I will come and help. And so with his divine beak, Garuda is the carrier of Lord Vishnu. With his divine beak, he starts to empty out the ocean. And when the ocean sees this, then immediately the ocean knows, oops, made a mistake here. The ocean knows that in fact, Garuda has the power to do this. And so immediately the ocean comes out with the eggs of the sparrow and gives it to the sparrow. So Prabhupada gives this as an example of the determination of a devotee. For us to reach the Lord is impossible. But Prabhupada says, God helps those who help themselves. But if we are determined, then Krishna will help us. And by Krishna's help, we will be able to reach the Lord. So we can only reach the Lord by Krishna's help, but Krishna's help will not come unless we help ourselves. Until Krishna sees that we are determined to help, to serve Krishna. And this is the big controversy between the cat school and the monkey school. Who is better? Is the baby monkey better or is the cat better? And the example is given because the monkey holds on to the baby monkey holds on to the big monkey by his own strength. But the little kitten doesn't hold on to the mother with her own strength, but she just lies on the ground and the mother picks her up by the teeth. Who is in the better situation? Well, if we depend on the Lord and the grace of the Lord, we are like the cat, the kitten. If we depend on our own strength, we are like the monkey. The problem is, and you see this in India many times, when the big monkey jumps from tree to tree, sometimes the little monkey, because he's just a little baby and doesn't have so much strength in their arms, falls off from the monkey and falls to the ground. And the little monkey's strength is limited, but the kitten never falls from the mouth of the cat. So therefore, it's said that the path of grace is better than the path of simply works. The path of grace is the cat school, and the path of works is the monkey school. But the best path is a combination of both. We're actually part of both schools because we don't simply depend on the grace of the Lord, we also not depend, but we also put in our own effort. So we have to be both part of the monkey school and on the cat school and the cat school. So work must be there. Now, as a response to this, someone might say, but what about causeless mercy? Right? We talk about causeless mercy. So that is true, that Krishna, because he's all powerful and the devotee is all powerful, out of their causeless mercy, even if we don't do any effort, and even if someone does not do an effort, out of their causeless mercy, they may save a devotee of the Lord. They may liberate the devotee. They may liberate a person. However, that is very, very rare. And as they say, an exception proves the rule. Krishna, may just go and pick someone out and liberate that person due to their causeless mercy. But that is very rare. And Krishna may show it to show his complete independence. But Krishna wants to see our effort. And secondly, although causeless mercy is there for everyone, still we have to accept that causeless mercy. Causeless mercy doesn't mean that it doesn't have any cause. The cause is the devotee. But causeless mercy means that there's no reason why it all of a sudden came. It's spontaneous. That mercy is spontaneously coming from a devotee. But once we're in touch with the devotee, that mercy is available to everyone. Srila Prabhupada's causeless mercy is available to everyone. When Srila Prabhupada was on this planet, then thousands of people came in touch with him. They all got that causeless mercy. But why is it that certain devotees made so much advancement and other people did not? Everyone had causeless mercy, but some of those people acted on that mercy. Why? Because of this point. Shruchinam Srimatam De. Because of their past pious activities, because of their service to the Lord, they were able to take advantage of that. They're agyata sukriti, or due to past pious activities. So causeless mercy is there, but we have to still accept that mercy. And those people who do are generally people who are or have made some effort. And so then the verse ends here. And on this point, just on this point, that in your past life, a devotee is someone who gets the mercy of the Lord, but we have to understand a devotee is so special because in their past life they've performed all these pious activities to become the devotee. That is this one here. The famous example of this was presented by Lord Chaitanya, who accepted Thakur Haridas Thakur as one of his most important disciples. Although Thakur Haridas happened to take his birth in a Muslim family, he was elevated to the post of Namacharya by Lord Chaitanya due to his rigidly attending principles of chanting 300,000 holy names of the Lord daily. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And because he chanted the holy name of the Lord constantly, it is understood that in his previous life, he must have passed through all the ritualistic methods of the Vedas, known as Shabda Brahma. Unless, therefore, one is purified, one cannot take to the principles of Krishna consciousness or become engaged in chanting the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna. So important here. Unless, therefore, one is purified, one cannot take to the principle of Krishna consciousness or chant Hare Krishna. Now, we say that chanting Hare Krishna has no rules and regulations and it's available for everyone, right? This is the prime benediction for this age. So why is Prabhupada here saying that we cannot chant unless we are purified? I thought by chanting Hare Krishna, we get purified. So this seems like a contradiction. But this is why Prabhupada is saying this. Because so many people came in touch with this Krishna consciousness. When the Harinam party goes out, so many people listen to Harinam. But why is it that one person takes up the process of chanting and the other do not? So even for chanting, there is some, you could say, qualification. Why is it? Chanting was there for everyone. If chanting is, the only way, then why everyone should take it? One person takes it because they have been purified to some degree. They were searching for God. They had performed some service to the Lord in this life or the previous life. Therefore, they took to the chanting. And this is actually the connection also between prasadam and chanting and book distribution, that so many devotees who are very seasoned book distributors have told me, like Vijay Prabhu, like Ganapati Swami, they've told me that when they distribute books, so often the people who take the books are people who have eaten at a Govinda's restaurant. They've eaten prasadam somewhere. Ganapati Maharaj mentioned this to me, that they are more likely to accept the book if they've actually had prasadam before. So, because why? They get the Agyata Sukriti, they got that Sukriti from the Lord by getting that prasad, due to which they were open to getting the book. And then once they get the book, then they're open to chanting. Then they start chanting regularly. And finally, last verses here, Krishna then, after telling the entire process of yoga, so he's completed the eightfold process of yoga, the whole method, the whole process. In the final two verses, he tells us who is the topmost yogi. And these are the most important verses of this chapter. He says, a yogi, so first of all, he establishes that the yogi is on top. He says, a yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empiricist, and greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. So, you have the fruitive worker, the karmi, then you have the jnani, then you have the dhyani, and then you have the yogi. So be a yogi. Yoga is better than these other things, these other processes. And then, text 47, he says, and of all the yogis, the one who, with great faith, who abides in me, always thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me, he is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. So he to remove all doubt, he says that the bhakti yogi, the one who renders transcendental loving service to me, and the exact Sanskrit word is bhakta. Krishna used the word bhakta. He is a devotee. He is Shraddhavan bhajate yomam, who is engaged in bhajan with faith. Shraddhavan bhajate yomam. Same yukta tamo mata. That person is connected with me. Yukta means united, connected with me in yoga. And this is the most amazing part of the Gita, that how in every chapter, again and again, Krishna points out that bhakti is the highest path. Yet, so many people miss it. I mean, that's why we have to hear it from a devotee. When Krishna talks about jnana, he says, Bahunam janmanam nante jnanavan mam prapadite vasudeva sarvamati samahatma sudurlabha. After many, many lifetimes of performing knowledge, one knows Vasudeva is everything. The result of jnana is Krishna. The result of jnana is bhakti. Same thing here, he's saying the result of yoga is also bhakti. Every 10 verses, Krishna emphasizes the importance of bhakti and shows without a doubt that how bhakti, devotional service to Krishna, is the most effective, the most highest yoga, and the devotee is the highest yogi. And anyone who therefore reads the Gita will see it for themselves, that this is what Krishna is saying. Yet I don't know how. It's like if people read it, I just don't know how they miss it, how they can ignore it, this fact that Krishna is saying this again and again. So this is the final here. We're actually in some ways right on schedule because we do about 2.5 hours every week. That's just been the way it has been. So it's been 2 hours. We have half an hour now for questions. Hare Krishna. Okay, thank you very much. Let's see. We have, yes. Gopal Govinda Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. My question is actually, I was just looking for, maybe I missed the reference, the Suchinam, Dhimatam, and The Srimatam you referred, right? So is it from Bhagavad Gita? Where is it? I missed it
Yes.
probably.
Yes, directly from the Gita. So if you go to text 41 and
Okay.
text 41 and text 42,
41.
these two verses. And Krishna in text 41, he first mentions the Shrutinam, that is the pious. And then he says Srimatam, which are those who are aristocratic. So he mentions it in reverse order. But Prabhupada in the purport explains that if you're little pious, then Srimatam, then you're born with money, then you're aristocratic. And if you're more pious, then you are Shrutinam. So then you're born in a pious family. And then text 42 says, if you're very pious, then you take birth in the family of transcendentalists, who Prabhupada says, the family of devotees. And there he gives his own example. Prabhupada, very humbly points out that he was born in the family of great transcendentalists.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Swati Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you for the wonderful class. Can you please clarify about internal and external samadhi, what that is?
Internal and external samadhi. So internal samadhi and external samadhi. And where did you hear this, internal and external samadhi?
Prabhuji, it was, when we are talking about dhyana and the 8 stages and how, they meditate and finally they get to samadhi.
Yes. Okay, so very good point. I just mentioned that in the context of explaining the samadhi of the gopis, that in that section it's described how so there's many things there. Some gopis could not go to Krishna. Right? They could not meet Krishna. They were actually successfully contained within their homes by their husbands and their relatives. And they attained samadhi by deep meditation upon Krishna within their hearts. And other gopis, and they got their spiritual form. Actually, they were in some ways as fortunate or even more fortunate than the gopis who met Krishna. And some gopis were able to go and meet Krishna. And those gopis that went and met Krishna, even they, upon seeing the Lord, were so overwhelmed by spiritual emotion and Krishna's beauty that they couldn't almost handle that beauty, that vision. And so they closed their eyes and they took the form of the Lord within their heart, and they were in samadhi upon the Lord within their heart. However, the point is, when they opened their eyes and they were dancing with Krishna, then that was also samadhi, because they're fully absorbed in Krishna's loving service. And they're fully, mind, senses completely in Krishna. They're dancing with Krishna. So samadhi is actually one. It's a state of complete absorption. But I was just saying that how some gopis were experiencing it internally within their hearts, and other gopis, or the same gopis at a different time, were experiencing Krishna externally. But both were in samadhi.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Prabhuji, I have a question. Is it?
Yes.
I'll wait for my turn. Or
well, I was going to mention actually that many people have written things in the chat, like Raj Prabhu and others. And while I'm speaking, I'm actually not able, especially when the slides are there, I cannot even actually see the chat. So, so those of you who have put your questions in the chat, now is the time. Please unmute yourself, and because I haven't read them, it won't be a second time, and you can ask your question. And the best method is if you could just raise your hand, because then I just go in order, and then everyone gets their turn in the order that they asked. So yes, Prabhu, please go ahead, and then after that we'll do Surba Mataji.
Okay, I assume you're asking me to go ahead.
Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you. So my question is on verse number 46. And in some respects, that's little bit of a complex verse, at least in my understanding. And my question is that it says here, tapasvibhya adhikah yogi jnanibhya api mataha adhiko. So a yogi is greater than the ascetic. So tapasvi and yogi are the two words used, that yogi is better than the tapasvi. So I am understanding, at least, and I request you to correct me, tapasvi is the subject of this chapter, the dhyana yoga, and that is the tapasya he's doing. And here Lord Krishna is mentioning yogi is greater than the tapasvi. So which one is the what is the position of the yogi compared to the tapasvi, or is it referring to the tapasvi in the beginning of the chapter who lights no fire?
Yes, Prabhu. So I'm so glad you brought this in the question, because we were running out of time, so we couldn't spend time on it. But you are absolutely correct that there's a lot in this verse that is important and that we need to focus on. The first thing is karmi bhyas. The actual Sanskrit word is karmi bhyash. So at the very bottom is the fruitive worker. Now, the fruitive worker is not exactly just the karmi that I mentioned. It's more the karma kandi, meaning that it's still pious. It's not just unrestricted sinful sense enjoyment. No, this fruitive worker is performing his works for the fruits of the action, but they're performing them according to the injunctions of the Vedas, but for the fruits. So the ritualistic karma kandis, who are on the, you could say, on the beginning level of spiritual advancement. They're still not advanced even as much as the karma yogis. They like sense enjoyment, they want it, but they're doing it through the Vedas, and in this way also worshiping the Lord. So that is a fruitive worker. Now, the greater than the fruitive worker is the empiricist, which is the person who is the intellectual. Intellectually, they're seeking God. And so they're reading a lot of books. It's still on the level of the intelligence and the mind. The jnani, without any bhakti with it. So devotee is also jnani, but jnana without any bhakti, that is the empiricist. Or very little, we could say, little bhakti. And then greater than the empiricist is the ascetic. And like you're saying very nicely, that is the tapasvi. That's a nice way to put it here.
I just took it from the verse directly.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
the first word.
Yeah, the first word, yes. So then you have the tapasvi. Now the tapasvi, this is someone like who initially Buddha was. The tapasvi is someone who performs severe austerities to seek the Lord. Buddha went out and he completely fasted. He was sacrificing the comforts of the body to reach the Lord. It's not the yogi. This is not the subject matter of chapter 6. Like you mentioned, it is more like the person who lights no fire and does no work. And Buddha very quickly realized that that was not going to work for him, because he almost died as a result of that tapasya. But tapasya is very powerful. Hiranyakashipu, becomes the most powerful person in the world simply through tapasya. He wasn't exactly a yogi. He was a tapasvi. Because yoga comes from the Sanskrit word yuj, which means to link or to connect. Yogi means someone who connects to the Lord through a process. It may be meditation, it may be bhakti, it may be dhyana. That person is connecting with the Lord through meditation. And so meditation is the process of yoga, dhyana yoga mentioned here. Tapasvi is simply an ascetic. He's performing austerities. So he's saying higher than austerities in the life of an ascetic is the life of a yogi. Along with the austerities, connect with the Lord. Meditate on the Lord.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the clarification.
Thank you.
Really
A
appreciate
wonderful
it.
question. Yes, Shilpa Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. It was really wonderful lecture. I'm learning every day new and new. So thank you. I have one question. Like you must have explained that maybe, but maybe I have missed that. What happened to the person who is practicing as a yogi for short term and the yogi who's practicing for the long term? I have another question as well, but if you allow me, I'll ask another. But this is the first question I have.
Yes. So for
The
short
yogi
term,
who, yeah, understood. Yeah.
yes. So for the short term yogi, that is Shrimatam or Shuchinam, depending upon how short it was. So if it was a little longer, then it was Shuchinam, born in the pious families. But short is these two, prosperous or pious family. Long-term yogi is Dhimatam, meaning after long yoga practice, if one is just a little still unsuccessful, he will be born in the family of devotees.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Should I go ahead and ask
Yes,
another
of course, yes.
short question?
Yes.
I was, just going through the verses, and I read about on the 19th, verse 19 is explanation about the deep. So when deep is in the wind, it will kind of not be stable. So can you explain more about that?
Yes, actually, I was going to mention, and it slipped my mind when I was speaking. This example, this metaphor is very key to yoga. This is text 19. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist, whose mind is controlled, remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. So, Mataji, which stage of yoga is this? This metaphor is describing a stage of yoga. In the 8 stages of yoga. You can say in English which one, or Sanskrit, whichever you prefer. It's the stage of dharana and dhyana. Dharana means you hold it in your mind.
Dhyan.
Dhyana.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Like you're saying dhyana. So the title of this
So I
chapter is
think
Dhyana
dharana.
Yoga. Sorry?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, it's a dharana. I don't know. So I'm just assuming.
Very good. So yes, it can be dharana and also dhyana. Dhyana means that your meditation is then fixed on the Lord. And the title of this chapter is Dhyana Yoga. So therefore, this metaphor is very important. It's like a lamp in a windless. If the wind is moving, then your mind is going to move everywhere, but the mind should be controlled like the lamp. Yes. Very nice.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Ambika Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Danvat Pranam, Jai Shila Prabhupada. Very nice class. So this question arose in my mind when we were reading verse 9. So verse 9 says, the essence of the verse 9 is that devotees, as a devotee, we see everybody with the equal vision. Whether they are our friends, enemies, especially for devotees, we don't have any enemies. So if you are trying to practice that as a devotee in devotee community, and you try to see every devotee with the equal vision, it's that's how we should practice. But at the same time, and I'm going to say that Krishna also says that, for Krishna every living entity is equal. But at the same time, Krishna says that whoever is bhakta, who are devotees, they are especially dear to me. So the same way in the devotee community, I'm no way I'm trying to compare myself to Krishna, but at the same time, even in the devotee community, if you're living with 15, 20 devotee community families, there are few that you reciprocate more, and you are very close to them. No, even though you are trying to be equal with everybody. So isn't it be like sort of like favoritism, or like
how can we practice that verse then? it's a good question. How can we then apply Krishna's verse?
Right.
Yes, in
Right.
that situation, as you're mentioning. So, very good point, Mataji, that you're making. Just like Narottam Das Thakur in his song, in the last verse, he says, Ramachandra Sangamage Narottam Das. Narottam Das Thakur is the personal associate of Lord Chaitanya, fully liberated soul. Yet there's a specific devotee that he's asking for the association. There's a specific devotee for whose association he's asking the Lord. Ramachandra, that was the name of the devotee. Ramachandra Sangamagi Narottam Das. So here's a devotee, Narottam Das Thakur, who is fully liberated, who sees every being equally, yet he is still asking for the association of a particular devotee who's particularly dear to him. And I think that's your question. So how can both of those things happen? And this is a matter of rasa. You see, this is more aesthetics, not you could say logic. On the philosophical level, on the spiritual level, the devotee is seeing everyone equally. Right? That is the principle. That is the teaching. If we say this person is envious of me, then that is a lack of our spiritual consciousness, because Krishna here is saying that if we see someone to be envious of us, then we are seeing them differently, which means our spiritual consciousness is not fully developed, which is okay. It's just reality, and so therefore we're moving forward. And the goal is that we have to see everyone equally, as a soul, as a servant of the Lord, and treat everyone equally. However, for the service of the Lord, for our service to Krishna, we will be close with certain devotees, because our service, our rasa, our mood matches with those devotees. So in the spiritual world, all the devotees of the Lord, all the gopis are completely liberated and equal to everyone. However, certain gopis work more closely with other gopis. Some are in Srimati Radharani's group, others are in Chandravani's group. So that is a matter of, you could say, that has to do with this devotee's mood of serving the Lord and the taste and the rasa that they're serving.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji. So I think that sort of answered my follow-up thought when, especially, let's say if few devotees, they are coming together and they associate with each other, and you feel like, or somebody else feels like that they are excluded from their association. So in that case, we should not be like, I'm not, obviously there is no way of being envious, but at the same time, sometimes you feel like you are excluded because, oh, those particular devotees, they get together and they associate with each other, and then we are excluded. So we should not feel that way.
Well, we should not. If that situation happens to us and we're feeling excluded, then we should not feel, because that's being in the mindset of duality, happiness, distress, honor, dishonor. But we should not exclude any devotee. The point is that we should not exclude any devotee. No one is excluded in spiritual life. We should not make, for example, sanghas based upon external material designations, which can even be based upon who our spiritual master is, because the spiritual master, the guru, is one. And if we are initiated by a bona fide guru, then we're all initiated by the same guru, that is Lord Balaram. But here the point that I was mentioning is one of more subtle point, of one of service, that with certain devotees we would have a closer relationship because our service to Krishna happens to be together. Because not everyone is serving the same thing to Krishna at the same time. Right? Different devotees have different roles in the spiritual world. Some devotees are making garlands, other devotees are singing for Krishna. So they have certain circles that work together to serve the Lord for the pleasure of the Lord. So that is a circumstantial and practical necessity in relationship to service. you connect with certain devotees. But it's not that there's kirtan happening and certain devotees are closer to others. That is then on the material level, because it's not related to service. It's due to material consciousness.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Good. Rohan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dhanavad Jai Prabhupada.
Hare.
Thank you for the very nice class today. Prabhuji, I had a question. In chapter 5, we spoke about the three doers, the jiva desiring, the super soul sanctioning, and the material nature executing. So you gave a nice example today that many people came in touch with Srila Prabhupada's causeless mercy. But why is it that one person takes to Krishna consciousness and one does not? So in this case, we understand that the jiva is not desiring, so there is no question of material nature fulfilling or the super soul sanctioning. But I was having difficulty in understanding why would the super soul not sanction if the jiva does desire? Because at the end of the day, the jiva has free will to exercise. So you also gave a nice example of Hitler saying that he was allowed to exercise his free will, probably because of all the pious deeds he had accumulated. So yeah, I was a little confused because free will is supposed to be free. So in what case would the super soul not sanction? Would it just be on the basis of we not having enough pious credits from our past lives?
Okay, so very good question. First clarification that Hitler, due to his pious activities, he got the position as the leader, or you could say dictator of that country. So he received an aristocratic position because of pious activities. However, his terror was not due to his pious activities. In other words, his sinful activities were due to his past sinful activities. But the point simply that we're making is that he was able to exercise his terror to the degree that others were not, because karmically there was some reason why he was allowed to do so. And so Krishna permitted that, although he doesn't desire it at all. So Hitler is completely condemnable, and his activities are completely fallen. But somehow or the other, he had some shakti with him, some power with him, due to which he was able to inflict so much harm on others. Even though there are people like him who get destroyed far before they were able to do those things. So Krishna, the Bhagavatam actually explicitly says that although he does not desire it, he will sometimes permit the soul to perform sinful activities so that the soul will learn from their mistakes, so that the soul will learn from making mistakes. That's the nature of this material world, the school of hard knocks. In the same way, if someone has a spiritual desire, then Krishna immediately fulfills it, because Krishna is waiting for that. But that's the spiritual desire that Krishna fulfills, not the so-called spiritual desire. So if we are going towards Krishna, if we take steps towards Krishna, Krishna will immediately start taking steps towards us. If, of course, we want to become the head pujari in the temple, Krishna may not permit that desire, because that desire may be mixed with material desire. That I want to be a devotee, but I also want to be the head or the leader or something like that. So then there's some mixture there. Krishna may or may not fulfill it. So if someone was searching for a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada, Krishna would put them in the right place so that they would see and that Prabhupada or hear it. But then it is up to the desire of the soul to further that relationship. And if they do that, then Krishna will permit that as well. So it is the desire of the soul that is very key. And then Krishna gives the permission based upon what that desire is. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Prabhuji, very nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Okay, those of you who have written things in the chat, maybe you can unmute yourself and give your comments or questions.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I don't have a question, but I just wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart. It was such a wonderful lecture, and it was so good that it clarified a lot of doubts I had in my mind. Dandavat pranams, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Very blessed to be part of this class. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Actually, that is the effect of the Bhagavad Gita. I see this myself, like I'm reading it, and I'm reading it as though I'm reading it the first time. At the end, Arjuna says that after hearing your instructions, he tells Krishna, all my doubts have been clarified. So thank you for your kind words. And and this is truly actually the effect of the Gita. It's such an amazing scripture. Every time, like you think you know it, like a person reads Gita 3 or 4 times, and you think I know it, and then the next time you read it, you're like, I didn't know any of this. This is the first time I'm reading this. So this is the unlimited nature of the Bhagavad Gita. Thank you. Other comments, questions from this chapter or the previous chapter?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
And your presentation is so wonderful, and it's amazing. And you're trying to give you like banana, removing the leaf and giving the fruit. So something like that you are giving the explanations. We're thankful to you and to Lord Krishna, so that an opportunity has been given to us to get a learning from you.
Thank you for your encouragement, bro. Thank you so much. It's because of devotees like yourself that this Bhakti Shastri is so enjoyable. The association of devotees.
Very nice. Thank you. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
May God bless you. May Lord Krishna bless you and give all his power to you, so that we can get the part of that in the learning process.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Aarti Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Danvat Pranams. Prabhuji, I just wanted a clarification of the understanding from chapter 5 to 6 of how is this, like when we say dhyana yoga, does that mean that that's the practice of Samkhya yoga? Is that a correct understanding? Like where the way to practice is the eightfold yoga?
Yes and no, because the 5th chapter begins with saying that that working in devotion is better than renunciation of work. Now, working in devotion is Bhakti Yoga. Renunciation of work, that is Sankhya Yoga or Sannyas, as we had discussed. So that is Sankhya Yoga. And this here, what Krishna is saying, is Dhyana Yoga, which is the yoga of meditation. It's not exactly the yoga of renunciation. That is Sankhya Yoga. It's not exactly working in devotion where, your job and your family, you're engaging in the Lord's service. This is Dhyana Yoga, which is the yoga of meditation, the Eightfold Path. So it is different. But at the same time, I also said yes, also, right? Yes and no. Why it's the same? Because Dhyana Yoga, in its most purified form, is Bhakti Yoga. So working for Krishna while meditating upon Krishna is Bhakti Yoga. And we can work for Krishna, do Karma Yoga while we are doing Dhyana Yoga, both. And we can do Sankhya Yoga while also doing Dhyana Yoga. We practice renunciation while also meditating upon the Lord. So the best way to understand these yogas is that in each yoga, there's a certain focus. The focus of Dhyana Yoga is more meditation. The focus of Karma Yoga is engaging in activities in Krishna. but there's also overlap. They are all the same ultimately because they all lead to Bhakti Yoga. So it's like oneness and difference. There's similarities, yet also differences. But they're different paths of yoga because the focuses of each yoga is different.
Okay, Prabhu, so I'm just trying to understand. So if all the yogas are the same, like, and we're told that, devotional service is the highest, then why does Krishna go through each one of these and explain how, in detail, basically saying, oh, we need to, the dharana and this and that, to get to a path which simply could be gotten through devotional service?
Yes. So they're the same in the sense that in a purified stage, they are the same. And they're the same in the sense that they're leading all to Bhakti Yoga. So, and I'm not saying this, Prabhupada says this actually, that Buddhi Yoga is Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga is Bhakti Yoga. Ultimately, you'll see Prabhupada's purports and his translations. In certain places, Prabhupada translates all the yogas as Bhakti Yoga. And he explains why. He says, because all of these yogas lead to Bhakti Yoga. But until you reach the stage of Bhakti Yoga, the focus is different. So in Dhyana Yoga, the focus is meditation and the Eightfold Path. And you're using that path to come to Bhakti Yoga. In Karma Yoga, the focus is whatever I'm doing, I'll offer it to Krishna. And you're using that so that one day you'll offer everything to Krishna out of love. And that is Bhakti. Sankhya Yoga is saying, all these material things are binding me. Let me give it up. You start renouncing things so that you can focus more on your devotion to Krishna. One day you'll reach Bhakti Yoga. So like rivers going to an ocean, they all lead to the ocean, but they still are all water. They're still all water. Why? Because they're all transcendental practices leading to the ocean, but they're still different paths.
Okay, Prabhuji, just one last thing.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah, I'm just trying to tie everything together for my understanding. So all these yogas that you just spoke of, there's different, are they given, like Krishna gives this to us instead of going straight to Bhakti Yoga because people are of different stages and different mentalities and may need a different path to get to something Bhakti Yoga. Is that the reason that all these are explained in so much detail?
Yes, yes. And a point to note here is that at the end of each one of these yogas, like we saw in chapter 6, Krishna clearly points out that Bhakti Yoga or the Bhakti Yogi is the highest. So whenever he mentions these other yogas, we see that he does also teach us Bhakti Yoga. So he's teaching both simultaneously, or he gives that indication to us constantly. But yes, exactly for this reason that you're saying, Krishna gives different types of yogas and different paths, because people are on different levels and they have different levels of advancement and different attractions. And that's an open secret. I mean, that's Krishna gives so many paths of yoga so that to show that there are different paths to reach him. That is the universal message of the Gita. Yes.
Okay. So, Prabhuji, one last thing, sorry. So as a practicing devotee, someone who is born into Krishna consciousness, I feel like I'm going a little backwards to understand all of these and then come to the point which I've been given from day one. So how do I mean, I'm studying this because I want to learn systematically the Bhagavad Gita, but I was just trying to understand, why am I going so deeply into these other paths when Srila Prabhupada has actually given us the treasure of Bhakti Yoga?
Wonderful question. I'm so glad you asked this. So your point is that, if we already have Bhakti Yoga, then why should we practice these other paths? And what is the need to know them and learn them and practice them? So like we said, all these paths lead to bhakti. That is, bhakti contains all of them. So if bhakti contains all of them, that means that these are parts of bhakti. These are actually the limbs of bhakti. So that depends on our level of realization and our reading of the Gita, on how we practice and perform these different types of yoga. For someone on the initial stage, dhyana yoga is very much, okay, sit, meditate, focus, But for the pure devotee of the Lord, which we are not, so I mean, that's in some ways way ahead. But even if one is, that's my point, that even if one is there on that platform of pure devotion, then the pure devotee of the Lord is reading dhyana yoga, and their dhyana yoga is like the yoga of the gopis for Krishna. As I mentioned, the gopis also were doing Ashtanga yoga, right? They were also doing dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. But they were doing it on this bhakti platform, on this super high bhakti platform. So these different paths of yoga are different limbs of bhakti. They can be. They're not required, but they are different limbs of bhakti. If we're a devotee, then don't we meditate upon the Lord? If we're a devotee, then don't we offer our things to the Lord? If we're a devotee, then don't we gain knowledge about the Lord? If we're a devotee, then we renounce things also. So all of these things are practiced by the devotee, but they're imbued with love. So they're completely relevant. Even the pure devotee of the Lord relishes reading Bhagavad Gita, but their realization of those principles is just much deeper.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for this very wonderful satsang. And it's time now, so we'll end. And I greatly look forward to your association next week. And please enjoy reading the Gita. I will try my best to give you the homework as soon as possible. Actually, very important thing, next Saturday, we won't have a class. I apologize, I deeply apologize. Probably the only week I'll skip in the whole session, but this next weekend, I just cannot do it. And we may have a makeup class, we may not, we'll see. But I know many of you, actually most of you, are behind in your homework. So what I would humbly request is that everyone, we won't have class next week. Some of you joined a little late, so it'll be a catch-up week. Everyone, please catch up with all of your homework. Utilize that time that you would attend class to catch up with your homework. And the next week, the week after that, we'll do chapter 7. And this is also very significant because with completing chapter 6, we've completed the first part of the Bhagavad Gita, the first 6 chapters. The Gita is divided into 3 parts. And so the first part ends with this chapter that we just did. So now we're taking a 1-week break, so to say. That break is for me, but not for all of you. And that break is for people who are up to date. So for those of you who are still, maybe behind a few homeworks, please utilize that time and catch up.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Can I ask a real quick question, Prabhu?
Yes.
In the chapter, you were explaining that how in front of yogis, even though Krishna is there, but they withdraw the mind from him being external and they focus on the inside. I apologize, I couldn't understand that point, Prabhu. And another thing, Prabhu.
Yes.
So whatever we are reading about this asana, this whole Ashtanga yoga system, my question is, where I am confused is, like you said, transcendentalist is a devotee also. Could be a devotee. So did devotees used to perform all this before? Because Krishna is speaking so general, the whole term, and I'm confused that is it really for like devotees, like those who are practicing Krishna consciousness, or is it only for those yogis olden days in Satyuga, those who used to sit in the forest and perform the meditation? And has any devotee performed this, like devotee, like Amrish Maharaj? Would they perform this?
I may have forgotten to mention this point. This is actually a good point that you bring this. In the practice of bhakti, the actual physical postures part is already included. One does not have to do that separately, and one does not have to practice that. And yes, I mentioned that in terms of the first 4 stages as opposed to the second 4 stages of yoga. The first 4 stages of yoga are not so emphasized separately in the practice of bhakti because they're included in the process of bhakti. So like you're saying, the devotee doesn't sit obviously and meditate on the tip of his nose. Rather, the devotee just meditates on the beautiful deity of the Lord. Why? Because that the point of meditating on the tip of the nose is actually to focus the mind so that we can meditate upon the Lord. If the Lord is already present there, then why should we meditate on the tip of our nose? So Krishna is giving that for the people who are on that level. But as Arti Mataji was asking, and I was responding to her, but devotee can take that instruction and follow it on an even deeper level. That okay, Krishna's instruction is for this purpose. At the end, Krishna is saying the highest yogi is the bhakta. So I will focus my mind on Krishna. I will see the form of Krishna. I will not see the tip of my nose. So that is included in the process of bhakti. And regarding this question about the gopis, I was just giving the example of gopis in this case, that because the gopis were in this mood of separation, love and separation, they were afraid of losing Krishna. At every moment, they feel separation from Krishna because they feel that at a certain point, I will be separated from Krishna. So like great yogis, and even not for that reason, but because they were great devotees, they imbibed the form of the Lord within their heart and they kept it there. They locked it there in their heart. And so even Bilva Mangal Thakur speaks like this. He tells Krishna, he says, you can run away from me, because Krishna comes to him and he's blind. And so he plays with Bilva Mangal Thakur and he can't find him. And Krishna keeps moving away from his hands. But Bilva Mangal Thakur says, but I've locked you up in my heart. And from there, from the prison of my heart, you cannot escape. So that is Dhyana Yoga, right? Dharana, withdrawing the object of our meditation within our heart. But it's on the highest stages of Bhakti Yoga. It's also deeply, deeply entrenched in Bhakti Yoga. So that is, this is where Dhyana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga mix. So yes, the devotee will automatically do these things out of their immense affection for Krishna. So like the verses there, right? That how automatically all the qualities of the demigods appear in the devotee. In the same way, automatically all the qualities of a yogi appear in the devotee. So we don't have to do these things separately, but the devotee is doing these things in essence.
So Prabhu, when Krishna is mentioning this whole yoga, I understood what you said. Thank you so much, Prabhu. That's a wonderful explanation. So, but devotees in the previous, like in the past, the pure devotees of Krishna, have they followed this Ashtanga yoga?
Of course. Oh, yes, so many of them. For example, Bharat Maharaj. Bharat Maharaj was doing this. He was practicing the yoga process. He was in the forest. He was meditating on the Lord, and he was fixing his mind on the Lord. Actually, Dhruva Maharaj did this. Bhagavatam describes the whole process. The Bhagavatam describes so many yogis, and I can give you the section. It's there where they describe the yogis doing the eightfold process. But unlike the Yoga Sutras, what they describe is that on the 8th stage, the stage of Samadhi, these yogis, they have tears rolling down their eyes and their hairs are standing on them and their body is shaking because in that Samadhi, they are seeing the Lord. So it takes the same yoga system and it just transforms it for bhakti. But so many of these devotees that you read in the Bhagavatam, the sages, Vishishta Muni, Vishwamitra, Atri, Kapila, Kardama, they're all performing the eightfold yoga path. And I forgot to mention this. Thank you for reminding me that all of them, they're doing this eightfold, this chapter 6. It's just that in this material world, our brains are just so mush. That's why we cannot do this chapter 6. And therefore Prabhupada said, just chant Hare Krishna, eat prasadam, and preach Krishna consciousness, and everything will come by itself, by the immense mercy of the Lord. That's why we're not doing it. But even today, some devotees are doing it. And our meditation, our dhyana yoga is our japa, the 16 rounds. And we can apply some of these principles to our 16 rounds. Asana, sit properly, like Prabhupada said, like sitting properly, focusing the mind and the senses on Krishna, sitting in a slightly elevated place. They can be applied to our japa mala. But yeah, like as mentioned in this day and age, it's just we don't have that. I sit and then my back starts hurting. So I find it easier to walk and chant. And Prabhupada also used to walk slowly and chant a little bit. We shouldn't walk too fast, I think. I mean, walking is good, but while chanting, because then the whole focus is in the walking. But Prabhupada used to walk and chant. So for those reasons, we are not doing this today.
Prabhu, another reason could be the Kali Yuga, right? Then in Kali Yuga, the conditions are so conditioned that we cannot go in the forest and sit and do all this, right?
Definitely, yes. That's the main reason. That is the reason. In Kali Yuga, our bodies are not so strong. The environment is not so pure. So we are unable to do this. Yes.
Okay, Prabhu, I think my concept is very much clear now, because whenever I used to read this part, I used to think, oh, this is for the yogis, with the big beards and big Himalayas sit, but this is not for devotees. That's why in the beginning, I asked you, Prabhu, what do you mean by transcendentalist? Is Krishna speaking generally for devotees also, or everybody?
Yes.
So,
no, Mataji, thank you for this point, because every word of the Gita is for devotees. This is all for devotees. And I've been doing a little bit of some physical practice of yoga, and I've noticed that since I've been doing that, it's helped me in my chanting. So that physical yoga is not necessary for chanting, but if it helps our mind to focus, it may be useful in chanting. Pranayama and the physical yoga, it does help control the mind. It actually somehow you get more strength over your mind when you do physical yoga, and I recommend it. I really do. It's easier for me to sit and chant because I do the yoga. My back doesn't hurt and things like that. So this is everything Krishna is telling us is very practical and needs to be applied, but understood through a pure devotee of the Lord. Right? Prabhupada gave us the standard that main things are service, are chanting to Krishna, and then we can do 1 hour of yoga, physical yoga every day. And in that we will do this Ashtanga practice, this meditative practice. So if anyone is looking for a yoga teacher, I can actually suggest someone's name. He's in India and he teaches over Zoom. He gives group classes also. And it's like every day 1 hour. And he's a devotee, very nice devotee. And you actually will see the effect in your life. It's very powerful.
Sure, Prabhu. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your association and your time and patience, especially.
No.
I take time to understand these things, Prabhu. It's pretty complex. And Prabhu, I have a small request. I know I encountered 2 problems in chapter 4. Yes. And I have a question. So is it possible that I leave a voice message? And
you
then
can ask me now, Mataji. You can ask me now. This is good time. So
sorry,
anyone
Prabhu,
who needs to leave can leave.
Muted.
Oh. So,
is it?
No, I'm not muted.
Maybe my internet has issues, possible.
Okay.
I'm not able to hear you. It's okay, maybe I'll hear the recording.
Okay.
We can hear you, Prabhuji.
You can hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not able to hear anyone, but thank you so much, Prabhu. I really appreciate it. I'm not able to hear you, but I'll ask you on the message. I have 2 doubts.
Okay.
And I'll find out and ask you. Thank you so much, Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Thank you. Please accept my obeisances. Everyone, Vanchakalpatarubhishya Kripasinubhyo Patitanam Pavnibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji,
Hare
if you have
Krishna.
a minute.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Shakti.
Thank you, Haribol.
I have sent you a message, Prabhuji.
Yes.
If you can have a look at it, I'd appreciate that.
An email message or text message?
Text, WhatsApp.
Okay, I'll take a look at it. Yes, yes, Prabhu. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Your questions are also very nice always. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, bro. Thank you.
Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
bro. Hare Krishna.